The next morning, news of the firings spread like wildfire. Social media platforms were flooded with posts from people who had either attended the event or heard about it through friends and family. Hashtags like VIP seat scandal and fired for a favor began trending, sparking debates across the country. Some people sided with Karoline Leavitt, calling her treatment unfair and questioning why such extreme actions had been taken over a seating mix-up. Others defended the organizers, arguing that high-profile events required strict protocols and that mistakes couldn't be tolerated. Among the millions following the story online was Rachel Monroe, a journalist known for her sharp investigative skills. Rachel wasn't just any reporter. She specialized in uncovering scandals hidden behind polished facades. Sitting at her cluttered desk in a small apartment downtown, she scrolled through her phone, reading tweets and comments about the incident. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. Why would an entire team of staff members lose their jobs over something as trivial as seating arrangements? It seemed excessive, almost suspicious. Rachel leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the edge of her notebook. She had seen similar cases before, events where seemingly minor issues spiraled into full-blown controversies. But this one felt different. There was more to it than met the eye. Determined to dig deeper, she decided to reach out to someone who might have inside knowledge. Daniel Hayes. Daniel was a former event coordinator who had once worked for Elite Events Group, the same company responsible for organizing Michelle Obama's speech. Though he had left the industry years ago under mysterious circumstances, Rachel knew he still kept tabs on its inner workings. Picking up her phone, she dialed his number and waited anxiously for him to pick up. "Hey, Rachel," Daniel answered after a few rings, his voice calm but guarded. "What's up?" "I need your help," Rachel said without preamble. "You heard about what happened last night, right? The whole VIP seat fiasco?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I saw some stuff online. Pretty wild." "It's not just wild, it's weird," Rachel replied. "Too weird. And I think there's more going on here than anyone realizes. Can we meet up? I could really use your perspective." Daniel hesitated. He had always been cautious when it came to discussing his past work experiences, especially anything involving Elite Events Group. But Rachel's persistence, and her knack for sniffing out trouble, was hard to ignore. Finally, he sighed. "All right, fine. Let's grab coffee later. But don't say I didn't warn you if things get messy." They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe a few blocks away from Rachel's apartment. When Daniel arrived, he looked exactly as Rachel remembered. Him, tall and lean, with tousled brown hair and a wary expression that suggested he was constantly bracing himself for bad news. They ordered their drinks, black coffee for Daniel, a latte for Rachel, and found a secluded corner table. "So, tell me everything you know," Rachel said, opening her notebook and clicking her pen. "Start with the basics. What's the deal with Elite Events Group?" Daniel took a sip of his coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness. "They're one of the biggest names in the business," he began. "They handle all kinds of high-profile events, political fundraisers, corporate galas, celebrity appearances. Their clients are usually people with deep pockets and even deeper secrets." "Secrets?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Well, let's just say they're not above bending rules, or outright breaking them, if it means keeping their clients happy," Daniel explained. "I worked there for 3 years, and trust me, nothing happens by accident. Every detail is planned, down to the second, every person vetted thoroughly. If something went wrong last night, it wasn't because of incompetence." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I figured, but why fire everyone involved? Doesn't that seem extreme?" "It does," Daniel admitted. "But there's probably a reason for it. Maybe someone screwed up big time, or maybe—" He trailed off, staring into his cup as though searching for answers in the dregs of his coffee. "Maybe they were trying to cover something up." "Cover something up?" Rachel echoed. "What do you mean?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, I'm just speculating here, okay? But sometimes these events aren't just about making people look good. They're about deals being made, favors being exchanged. Seating arrangements can be crucial. They determine who talks to whom, who gets noticed, who doesn't. If someone messed with that plan, Rachel's eyes widened as the pieces started falling into place. You think Karoline's removal wasn't random, she said slowly. You think it disrupted something bigger. It's possible, Daniel replied. But proving it won't be easy. People like Elite Events Group don't leave trails unless they want you to find them. As they talked, Karoline Leavitt was having a very different kind of morning. She woke up groggy and disoriented, her head pounding from lack of sleep. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a broken record, each memory amplifying her frustration. She had gone to bed angry, convinced that she'd been treated unfairly, but now she felt something else, a gnawing sense of unease. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the bedside table, lighting up with notifications from texts, emails, and social media alerts. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Friends, colleagues, even reporters she barely recognized. At first she tried to ignore them, but curiosity got the better of her. Scrolling through her messages, she noticed a pattern. Several people had mentioned receiving strange information about her. Rumors claiming she had caused the firings herself. Accusations that she was using the incident to gain attention. Karoline frowned, shaking her head in disbelief. That couldn't be true. She hadn't done anything wrong. Or had she? Doubt crept into her thoughts, twisting her confidence into uncertainty. Was it possible she had unintentionally stepped into something dangerous? Her concerns deepened when she opened her email inbox. Among the flood of unread messages was one that stood out. The subject line read simply, "Stay silent." Her heart skipped a beat as she clicked on it, only to find the body of the message completely blank. No sender name, no explanation, just those two ominous words glaring back at her. Panic surged through her veins. Who would send something like this? And why? She stared at the screen for several minutes, half expecting another message to appear, but nothing came. Shaken, she closed her laptop and paced around her apartment trying to make sense of what was happening. Later that afternoon, Karoline decided to take a walk to clear her head. As she strolled through the park near her building, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every passerby seemed to glance at her a little too long. Every rustle of leaves sounded louder than usual. By the time she returned home, her nerves were frayed and her paranoia was at an all-time high. That evening, as she unlocked her front door, she froze. Something was off. The lock felt loose, as though it had already been tampered with. Heart racing, she pushed the door open cautiously and stepped inside. Her apartment looked normal enough. At first glance, nothing appeared out of place. But then she noticed it. Her desk drawer was slightly ajar, papers scattered haphazardly across the surface. Someone had been here. Fear gripped her chest as she moved quickly to check the rest of the apartment. Everything else seemed untouched, but the message was clear. Whoever had broken in wasn't looking to steal valuables. They were sending a warning. Karoline sank onto her couch, trembling as reality hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about a seating arrangement anymore. She was caught in the middle of something far bigger, something she didn't fully understand yet. Meanwhile, Rachel and Daniel continued their investigation, piecing together fragments of information from leaked documents and anonymous tips. They discovered that Elite Events Group had close ties to several influential figures in politics and business, including a powerful lobbyist named Victor Lang. Though they couldn't confirm his direct involvement in the scandal, his name kept popping up in connection with recent events. He's slippery, Daniel muttered, reviewing a list of names on Rachel's laptop. If anyone knows how to pull strings without leaving fingerprints, it's him. Rachel nodded grimly. We'll need more evidence if we want to tie him to this mess. But if we play our cards right, we might just crack this thing wide open. Unbeknownst to them, Karoline was beginning to realize that she needed help. And fast. Alone, she wouldn't stand a chance against whoever was targeting her. But reaching out meant trusting others, something she wasn't sure she was ready to do. For now, all she could do was stay alert and hope that answers would come soon. Rachel Monroe sat at her desk late into the night, surrounded by stacks of papers and open tabs on her laptop. The room was dimly lit, save for the soft glow of her desk lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. Her focus was unwavering as she sifted through documents leaked by an anonymous source. Each file hinted at something bigger, a web of connections linking elite events group to powerful figures in politics and business. But nothing concrete had surfaced yet. Daniel Hayes leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and a look of concern etched on his face. He had agreed to help Rachel dig deeper, but the more they uncovered, the more uneasy he felt. "You're poking a hornet's nest," he said, finally breaking the silence. "People don't get fired over seating arrangements unless it disrupts something major, and if we keep pushing, someone's going to notice." "I know," Rachel replied without looking up. Her voice was calm but resolute. "But that's why we have to keep going. If we stop now, whoever's behind this wins. Besides, Karoline Leavitt isn't the only one caught in this mess. Those staff members lost their jobs because of it. Don't you think they deserve answers?" Daniel sighed, knowing she was right. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into dangerous territory. "All right, but let's be smart about it. We need to find someone who can give us real insight. Someone who was there when it happened." That's when Rachel remembered Emily Carter, one of the fired staff members whose name had come up during their research. According to social media posts, Emily had been vocal about her frustration after being let go. Maybe she'd be willing to talk. After some digging, Rachel managed to track down Emily's contact information and sent her a message explaining who they were and what they were trying to do. To their surprise, Emily responded almost immediately. She agreed to meet them the following day at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. When Rachel and Daniel arrived, they found Emily sitting alone at a corner table, nervously stirring sugar into her tea. She looked younger than they expected, with tired eyes and a tense posture that suggested she hadn't slept well in days. "Thanks for meeting us," Rachel said gently as they took their seats. "We know this has been tough for you, but anything you can tell us might help us figure out what really happened." Emily hesitated, glancing around the cafe as though checking for eavesdroppers. "I don't know how much I can say," she admitted. "They made us sign confidentiality agreements before letting us go, but I think you're right. Something wasn't normal about all this." "Start with what you saw," Daniel encouraged. "Even small details could matter." Emily nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "Okay, so the seating plan was supposed to be locked in days before the event. Everything was double-checked, triple-checked, you know how these things work, but then last minute, changes started happening. New names were added, old ones removed. It was chaos." "Who made the changes?" Rachel asked, leaning forward. "Slightly. That's the thing, I don't know," Emily replied. "It came from higher up, someone above my pay grade. All I know is that when Ms. Leavitt showed up and refused to move, everyone panicked. Like, really panicked. It wasn't just about her seat, it was like she disrupted something way bigger than any of us understood." Rachel exchanged a glance with Daniel. This confirmed their suspicions. The seating arrangement wasn't random. It had been carefully orchestrated for a purpose, and Karoline's presence in the wrong seat had thrown a wrench into whatever plan was in motion. "What about Victor Lang?" Rachel ventured cautiously. "Did you ever hear his name mentioned in connection with the event?" Emily's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the lobbyist. "Yeah, actually. A few days before the gala, one of the coordinators got called into a private meeting with him. No one knew what it was about. But afterward, things got weird. More secretive, like suddenly everything had to be perfect, or else." Daniel frowned, processing this new information. "And the firings? What did they say to justify that?" "They didn't," Emily said bitterly. "Just told us to pack our stuff and leave. No explanation, no severance package, nothing. Some of us tried asking questions, but they shut us down fast. That's when I realized this wasn't about mistakes. It was about covering something up." The conversation with Emily left Rachel and Daniel with more questions than answers, but it also gave them a clearer direction. They needed to focus on Victor Lang and his role in the scandal. If they could prove he was involved, they might uncover the truth behind the seating fiasco and the firings. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's life was spiraling further out of control. Since discovering her apartment had been broken into, she had become hyper-vigilant, jumping at every sound and constantly checking her surroundings. Sleep eluded her, and her appetite vanished. The mysterious messages continued to arrive, each one more cryptic than the last. One email simply read, "You're playing a dangerous game." Desperate for advice, Karoline reached out to an old friend, Lisa Harper, who worked as a cybersecurity expert. Lisa listened intently as Karoline recounted everything that had happened, from the seating incident to the break-in. When she finished, Lisa didn't dismiss her fears. Instead, she offered practical solutions. First, change all your passwords, Lisa instructed. Use strong ones and enable two-factor authentication wherever possible. Second, get yourself a burner phone, something untraceable. And third, she paused, choosing her words carefully. If you're serious about finding out what's going on, you'll need allies, people you can trust. Karoline hesitated. Trusting others wasn't easy for her, especially now. But she knew Lisa was right. Alone, she was vulnerable. With help, she might stand a chance. Reluctantly, she decided to reach out to Rachel Monroe, whose name had appeared in several articles about the scandal. When Karoline contacted Rachel, the journalist was initially cautious. She had seen how public figures often used reporters to spin narratives in their favor, and she didn't want to be manipulated. But after hearing Karoline's story, and sensing her genuine fear, Rachel agreed to meet her. Their first encounter took place in a secluded park, far from prying eyes. Karoline explained everything: the threats, the break-in, her growing suspicion that she had stumbled onto something sinister. Rachel listened intently, jotting down notes and asking thoughtful questions. By the end of their conversation, she was convinced that Karoline was telling the truth, and that they shared a common goal. "We think Victor Lang is involved," Rachel revealed. "He's a lobbyist with ties to elite events group and some very powerful people. If we can connect him to the seating mix-up, we might expose the whole operation." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "Victor Lang? I've heard that name before. My boss mentioned him once, something about a fundraiser he helped organize. Do you think he orchestrated the seating plan?" "It's possible," Rachel replied, "but proving it won't be easy. We'll need evidence, emails, contracts, anything that links him directly to the event." Determined to gather proof, Rachel and Daniel devised a plan to infiltrate Elite Events Group's network. Using skills honed from years of investigative work, they identified a weak point in the company's digital infrastructure, an employee portal accessible to former staff members. With Emily's reluctant assistance, they gained temporary access to internal documents, including emails and financial records. What they found was staggering. Hidden within layers of encrypted files were references to a secret agenda tied to Michelle Obama's speech. Key attendees had been strategically seated to facilitate private conversations during breaks, an elaborate scheme designed to broker deals and secure political favors. Karoline's removal had disrupted these plans, prompting a frantic scramble to contain the fallout. But the most damning discovery was yet to come. Buried deep within the data was a series of communications between Victor Lang and senior executives at Elite Events Group. These messages outlined specific instructions for the seating arrangements, along with veiled threats about the consequences of failure. It was clear that Lang had played a central role in orchestrating the event, and that the firings were part of a calculated effort to silence anyone who might expose the truth. Armed with this evidence, Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline prepared to take their findings public. However, they knew the risks involved. Exposing such a high-profile scandal would draw attention not only to the perpetrators, but also to themselves. They were about to step into the spotlight, and there was no turning back. The weight of what they had uncovered pressed heavily on Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline as they gathered in a dimly lit conference room at a small office space rented under a fake name. The walls were bare except for a whiteboard covered in scribbled notes, names, dates, connections, all pieced together from the documents stolen from Elite Events Group's internal network. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink, but no one seemed to notice. Their focus was razor sharp. Rachel stood near the front of the room, her laptop open on the table as she scrolled through encrypted files. "We've got enough, here to blow this wide open," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Victor Lang's emails are damning. He wasn't just involved, he was calling the shots." Daniel nodded, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. His expression was grim, his mind racing through the potential consequences of exposing such powerful people. "It's not going to be pretty when we publish this," he warned. "Lang doesn't play nice. If he finds out we're on to him before we go public, we're all targets." Karoline sat quietly at the edge of the table, her hands clasped tightly together. She hadn't expected to find herself in this position when she first walked into that gala hall days earlier. Now she felt like a pawn in a much larger game, one where every move carried life-altering risks. Still, she knew backing down wasn't an option, not after everything she'd been through. "What happens if we wait?" Karoline asked softly, looking between Rachel and Daniel. "If we sit on this information too long, won't someone else try to cover it up?" "That's exactly why we need to act fast," Rachel replied. "But rushing could also get us killed or worse. We have to time this perfectly, release the story when everyone's watching, when it can't be ignored or brushed aside." They spent hours strategizing, debating how to present the evidence without putting themselves in unnecessary danger. Rachel suggested publishing the expose in stages, a teaser article to grab attention, followed by a full report complete with screenshots of the incriminating emails and financial records. Daniel proposed creating backups of all their findings and storing them in secure locations, so even if something happened to them, the truth would still come out. By the time they finished planning, the sun had risen outside, casting pale light through the blinds. Exhausted but determined, they agreed to split up tasks. Rachel would draft the initial article, Daniel would handle the technical side of securing their data, and Karoline would prepare a statement explaining her role in the scandal and urging others to speak up. As the day wore on, Karoline found herself struggling to focus. Her nerves were frayed, her thoughts consumed by worst-case scenarios. What if Lang retaliated? What if the article didn't make a difference? She tried to distract herself by cleaning her apartment, organizing her closet, anything to keep her hands busy. But nothing worked. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Every ring of her phone sent a jolt of panic through her chest. Finally, unable to bear the isolation any longer, she called Lisa Harper, her cybersecurity expert friend. Lisa listened patiently as Karoline vented her fears, offering reassurance, without sugarcoating the risks. "You're doing the right thing," Lisa told her firmly. "People like Lang thrive because no one stands up to them. But remember, you're not alone anymore. You've got Rachel and Daniel and me. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Her words brought a small measure of comfort, enough for Karoline to push forward. Later that evening, she recorded a video statement speaking directly to the camera with raw honesty. "I didn't ask to be part of this," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But now I am, and I can't stay silent. This isn't about me. It's about holding powerful people accountable. If you know something, say something. Together, we can make sure justice is served." She sent the video to Rachel, who promised to include it in the article. For the first time in days, Karoline felt a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, Rachel worked tirelessly on the expose, poring over every detail to ensure accuracy. She knew the stakes were high. If even one piece of evidence was questioned, the entire story could collapse. As she typed, snippets of Victor Lang's emails flashed across her screen, each line more incriminating than the last. One particular message stood out: "Ensure row A aligns with Plan B. Any deviation will result in immediate termination." Termination. It was chilling how casually the word was used, as though firing staff members en masse was a trivial matter. Rachel shivered involuntarily, reminding herself why she had chosen this career path. Stories like this were why journalism mattered, to shine a light on corruption and give a voice to those silenced by power. When the draft was finally ready, She sent it to Daniel for review. He read it carefully, making minor edits and suggesting additional context to clarify certain points. By the time they were satisfied, it was nearly midnight again. They decided to release the teaser article the next morning, timed to coincide with Michelle Obama's appearance on a popular morning talk show. The timing was deliberate, an attempt to draw maximum attention to the scandal. Unbeknownst to them, Victor Lang was already aware that someone was sniffing around. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, had flagged several suspicious activities. Unusual login attempts on Elite Events Group's servers, whispers among former employees about leaked documents, and a sudden spike in online chatter about the firings. When Patricia presented her findings, Lang's face darkened with fury. "Find out who's behind this," he ordered coldly, his voice low but laced with menace, "and shut them down. Permanently." Patricia hesitated, knowing better than to question him. Instead, she reached out to a private investigator known for handling delicate matters discreetly. Within hours, the investigator traced the source of the breach back to Emily Carter, whose credentials had been used to access the employee portal. From there, it was only a matter of time before they identified Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline as key players. The morning of the teaser article's release arrived and Rachel hit publish with a mixture of excitement and dread. Within minutes, the piece went viral, sparking outrage and speculation across social media. Headlines screamed phrases like "VIP seat scandal exposed" and "powerful lobbyist linked to mass firings." Journalists scrambled to verify the claims while politicians demanded investigations. Victor Lang watched the chaos unfold from his penthouse office, his jaw clenched in barely contained rage. He had spent decades building his empire, cultivating relationships with some of the most influential figures in the country. And now, thanks to 3 meddling individuals, it was all unraveling before his eyes. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "It's me," he said curtly when the call connected. "I need cleanup. Immediately." On the other end of the line, a gravelly voice responded, "Consider it done." Back at the rented office space, Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline monitored the reaction to the article in real time. Comments poured in from readers praising their courage, while news outlets began reaching out for interviews. It felt surreal, almost dreamlike to see their efforts gaining traction so quickly. But amidst the euphoria, a shadow loomed. A text message appeared on Rachel's phone. "You shouldn't have done this." Her blood ran cold as she showed the message to Daniel and Karoline. None of them spoke, they didn't need to. The threat was clear. Whoever was coming for them wouldn't stop until the truth was buried again. "We stick to the plan," Rachel said finally, her voice firm, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Tomorrow we release everything, no matter what happens, we finish this." The morning after the teaser article went live, Rachel Monroe woke up early, her mind racing with anticipation and dread. She hadn't slept much. How could she, knowing what was coming next? Today was the day they would release the full exposé, laying bare every detail of Victor Lang's involvement in the scandal. It was their final move, their chance to expose the truth and hold powerful people accountable. But it also meant painting a target on their backs. She met Daniel Hayes and Karoline Leavitt at the same rented office space where they had spent countless hours piecing together the story. The room felt different now, charged with a sense of urgency that made even the air seem heavier. Rachel opened her laptop and began uploading the final version of the exposé to her publication's website. Every word had been carefully crafted, every document double-checked for accuracy. There was no room for error, not today. As the upload bar inched closer to completion, Daniel paced nervously near the window, occasionally glancing outside as though expecting trouble to arrive at any moment. "You think we're ready for this?" he asked, his voice low but tinged with anxiety. "No," Rachel admitted without hesitation, "but we don't have a choice. If we back down now, everything we've worked for falls apart." Karoline sat quietly at the table, staring at her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the endless stream of notifications flooding in from the teaser article. People were talking about her, debating whether she was a victim or part of some elaborate scheme. Some praised her bravery. Others accused her of seeking attention. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was finishing what they'd started. When the exposé finally went live, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted with outrage as screenshots of Victor Lange's emails spread like wildfire. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, amplifying its reach until it dominated headlines worldwide. Politicians called for investigations, demanding answers about the shadowy deals brokered during Michelle Obama's speech. For the first time in years, the public saw a crack in the polished facade of elite event planning, a glimpse into the corruption lurking beneath. Victor Lange watched the chaos unfold from his penthouse, his face pale with fury. He had always prided himself on staying one step ahead, on manipulating situations to his advantage. But this was beyond anything he had anticipated. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from panicked associates, each one desperate for damage control. Yet Lange barely heard them. His focus was razor-sharp, directed entirely on one goal: silencing those responsible. He picked up his phone and dialed another number. This time, the voice on the other end belonged to a man named Marcus, a fixer known for handling problems discreetly and permanently. "Take care of it," Lange instructed coldly. "All of them." Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline knew they were running out of time. Within hours of the exposé's release, strange things began happening. Their phones buzzed constantly with unknown numbers, only to disconnect when answered. Cars lingered suspiciously outside their apartments, their occupants hidden behind tinted windows. Even the rented office space felt less secure, as though eyes were watching them from every corner. "We need to disappear," Daniel said bluntly during a hurried meeting later that evening. "At least for a while, until this blows over or until Lange is arrested." "And go where?" Karoline asked, her voice shaking. "If we run, won't that make us look guilty? Like we fabricated the whole thing?" "It's not about looking guilty," Rachel interjected. "It's about staying alive long enough to see justice served. We've already backed up all the evidence. Even if something happens to us, the truth will still come out." Reluctantly, Karoline agreed. They decided to split up temporarily, each heading to a safe location arranged by Lisa Harper, who had tapped into her network of cybersecurity colleagues to secure temporary hideouts. Before parting ways, they exchanged burner phones programmed with emergency contact numbers and promised to stay in touch. For the next several days, the trio lived in isolation, cut off from the world but acutely aware of the storm raging around them. Federal authorities launched an investigation into Elite Events Group, raiding offices and seizing files. Victor Lange became the central figure of scrutiny, his name splashed across newspapers and television screens. Witnesses came forward, including former staff members too afraid to speak up before. Each testimony added weight to the case against him. One such witness was Emily Carter, the fired employee who had initially tipped Rachel and Daniel off. With legal protection assured, Emily testified about the pressure she and her colleagues faced to follow orders without question. Her account painted a damning picture of Lange's influence, confirming suspicions that the seating arrangements were part of a larger scheme to manipulate political and business relationships. Public outrage reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered outside government buildings demanding accountability. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at increasing transparency in high-profile events. For once, the system seemed to be working, but it wasn't fast enough for Rachel, Daniel, and Karoline. Then, just when it seemed like Lange might escape unscathed, a breakthrough occurred. One of his closest associates, fearing imprisonment, turned state's witness in exchange for immunity. The associate provided investigators with audio recordings of private meetings where Lange explicitly discussed using events to broker illegal deals. Among the recordings was a chilling conversation detailing the firings as a necessary cleanup to prevent leaks. Armed with this new evidence, federal agents moved swiftly. Early one morning, they stormed Lange's penthouse, arresting him on charges of conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. As cameras captured the moment he was led away in handcuffs, millions watched with a mix The grand hall shimmered under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of people dressed in their finest suits and gowns filled the space, chatting excitedly as they sipped champagne from delicate glasses. The air buzzed with anticipation. Because tonight was no ordinary evening, it was a celebration honoring Michelle Obama, one of the most admired women in modern history. Her presence alone had drawn a crowd that included politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and journalists eager to catch even a glimpse of her. Karoline Leavitt stood near the entrance, smoothing down the front of her sleek navy blue dress. She wasn't just any guest. She was here as part of an exclusive group invited to sit in the VIP section. This was her moment, or so she thought. As someone who had worked tirelessly to climb the ranks in Washington's competitive social scene, Karoline knew how important it was to be seen in the right places. And tonight, being seated close to Michelle Obama would do wonders for her reputation. She glanced at the program card tucked neatly inside her clutch. It clearly stated her name next to Row A, Seat 3, a prime spot right in the middle of the VIP area. With a satisfied smile, she made her way toward the designated rows, weaving through clusters of guests until she reached her seat. The chair was perfectly positioned, offering an unobstructed view of the stage where Michelle Obama would soon appear. Karoline settled into her seat, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over her. But then, something unexpected happened. Just moments after she sat down, a young man wearing a black blazer approached her. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other as he held up a clipboard. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly, leaning closer so only she could hear him. "I'm sorry, but this seat has been reserved for someone else." Karoline frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Reserved? For whom?" "My name is on the program." She pointed to the printed card still clutched in her hand. "See, it says Karoline Leavitt, Row A, Seat 3. The young man hesitated, glancing back toward the stage before meeting her gaze again. "I understand, ma'am, but there must have been some kind of mix-up. We've been told this seat needs to go to another guest." Karoline felt a surge of irritation bubbling beneath the surface. Mix-up? That didn't make sense. Everything about this event had been meticulously planned. How could there be a mistake when it came to seating arrangements? She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice to match his tone. "Listen, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not moving. You can check with whoever you need to, but I'm staying right here." The young man swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ma'am, please," he pleaded. "If you don't move, it's going to cause problems. I'll find you another seat, somewhere better, but you really need to come with me now." By this point, nearby guests were beginning to notice the commotion. Some turned their heads discreetly, while others openly stared, curious about what was happening. Karoline could feel their eyes on her, and it only fueled her frustration. Who did these people think they were, trying to kick her out of a seat that belonged to her? "I'm not leaving," she said firmly, crossing her arms over her chest. "Not unless you can show me proof that this seat isn't mine." For a brief moment, the young man seemed at a loss for words. Then, without warning, a woman appeared beside him. She was older, dressed in a sharp red suit, and carried herself with an air of authority. Her expression was stern as she addressed Karoline. "Miss Leavitt, correct?" she asked briskly, barely giving Karoline time to nod before continuing. "There's been a scheduling error. Your seat has been reassigned to accommodate a last-minute change. Please follow my associate to your new location." Karoline blinked, taken aback by the sudden appearance of this woman. "A scheduling error?" she echoed incredulously. "That doesn't explain why I'm being asked to leave my assigned seat." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not up for debate," she replied coolly. "You're causing a disruption, and we cannot afford any delays. If you refuse to cooperate, security will escort you out." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. Karoline clenched her jaw, torn between indignation and disbelief. Was this really happening? Could they just throw her out because of some supposed error? She wanted to argue further, to demand answers. But the determined look in the woman's eyes told her it wouldn't do any good. Reluctantly, she stood up, grabbing her clutch and following the young man to a less desirable row near the back of the room. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back at her original seat. A tall, elegantly dressed woman was already settling into it, completely unaware, or perhaps indifferent to the drama that had unfolded moments earlier. Karoline sighed deeply, sinking into her new seat with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. What a mess. Meanwhile, backstage, chaos was brewing. News of the seating mishap had traveled quickly, reaching the ears of senior management. One of the executives, a wiry man named Charles Bennett, paced anxiously in his office, muttering curses under his breath. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from concerned staff members, each one reporting escalating tensions among the team responsible for handling the seating arrangements. "This is unacceptable," Charles snapped into the phone during one particularly heated conversation. "Do you realize what's at stake here? Do you have any idea who those seats were meant for?" On the other end of the line, a frightened voice stammered an apology. "Sir, we thought everything was in order. There must have been a miscommunication somewhere." "A miscommunication?" Charles roared, slamming his fist onto the desk. "This isn't just some minor oversight. These seats are critical to the success of tonight's agenda." "Critical," he ended the call abruptly, breathing heavily as he tried to compose himself. But the damage had already been done. Word of the incident had spread like wildfire, and now everyone involved, from the ushers to the coordinators, was scrambling to contain the fallout. Unfortunately for them, it was too late. 5 minutes later, a chilling announcement echoed through the staff quarters. All employees associated with the seating arrangements were summoned to a private conference room. When they arrived, they found Charles waiting for them, his face pale but resolute. Without preamble, he delivered the devastating news. Every single one of them was fired, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room as the reality of the situation sank in. Some cried, others protested, but none dared to challenge Charles directly. They were escorted out of the building within minutes, their careers abruptly derailed by a decision they barely understood. Back in the main hall, Michelle Obama took the stage to thunderous applause. Her speech was eloquent and inspiring, capturing the hearts of everyone in attendance. But for Karoline, the words barely registered. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past hour, each detail gnawing at her pride and curiosity. What had truly happened? Why had such drastic measures been taken over a simple seating arrangement? And most importantly, what secrets lay hidden beneath the polished surface of this glamorous event? Little did she know. The answers to these questions would lead her down a path far more dangerous and revealing than she could ever imagine.